Continue. Oops. Tracy, can you just click on continue? Is everybody on?
They are.
Okay, perfect. Do you see this webinar is being recorded in the middle as a window, or you don't?
You don't have to worry about that.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Well, welcome everyone. This is the webinar for pro bono volunteering and getting started with your first immigration case. We are today hosting it with two wonderful ladies, Nora Phillips, who's the managing attorney at Otro, Lado, and Ambreen Walji, who's a staff attorney and pro bono coordinator for the IJP. So I'm Sarah Brunet. I am the chair of the YLD Immigration Naturalization Law Committee. And I've planned this webinar for you today. I hope you enjoy it. I will let the speakers introduce themselves. Nora, if you want to start.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Nora Phillips, and I am the co-founder and legal director of Otro, Lado. We were started about 10 years ago in Tijuana, and we have offices in TJ, San Diego, Maywood, California, and then I'm based at LA County Hospital. And I've been practicing since 2007, and I'm originally from Wisconsin. And I do a ton of U visas and humanitarian paroles. So that's me.
Awesome. Ambreen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Ambreen. I am the pro bono coordinator and a staff attorney with the ABA Immigration Justice Project. We are a project under the ABA Commission on Immigration. We're based out of San Diego, California, and a little bit about me, I'm actually Canadian, and I joined the IJP in 2019. Before that, I practiced some immigration in New York City and some child welfare in Toronto and New York. Got into this work because of the client base, which I'm sure we're going to speak about, and the value and of participating in helping newcomers get status in the United States.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. So I think that you both are wonderful people to talk about what it is to volunteer and to take on a pro bono case. And the first question that I think people have is why volunteer? I actually cannot see on my screen if this is the right slide. So is it the right slide? It's why volunteer. Okay. So maybe Ambreen, can you tell us a little bit about why people volunteer, especially through an organization? Because obviously people can volunteer on their own, but I think we want to concentrate through this webinar about volunteering through an organization, which is a totally different experience. So why volunteer with IJP or Otro, Lado or some other organization?
Sure. I mean, volunteering in general is meaningful. It exposes you to a different area of practice. It exposes you to a new experience. I can speak most particularly about volunteering with IJP. IJP works primarily out of the Otro Detention Center at the border of San Diego and Tijuana, and so we see people from all over the world, all walks of life. We see people of different professions, people of different ages, every race, every ethnicity. And then the reason why I think most people volunteer with IJP is the stories that you're exposed to and that you learn about when you are representing a client. So you really are doing life-saving work when you take on an immigration case with an organization like Otro, Lado or IJP. We work with people who are in detention and they are being detained in a situation that puts them in an extreme, that is extremely traumatizing. Yeah, exactly, a disadvantage. And they are cut off from the rest of the world. And so, especially in a situation like we've seen in the past year and a half with the COVID-19 pandemic, where there haven't been visitors in detention and courts haven't been proceeding as they would have previously, population that is otherwise isolated is even more isolated. And we've seen that attorneys are literally helping lift the spirits and hopes of these asylum seekers who have already experienced trauma in their home countries and are now re-traumatized by this detention system and immigration system that really is adversarial and makes them feel like criminals when many of them don't have any criminal history. And so their attorneys are really the people who they know are on their team and who are fighting the good fight on their behalf. And so I think the main reason why people volunteer is to hear the stories and to be able to elevate them and hold the hand and really rally for somebody who needs them. And
I think something that maybe people that are not used to immigration may not realize is when people come and present themselves at the border or are apprehended at the border, they are very often placed in a very long detention circle. So maybe you can tell us about it, that it's not, that it's people like you and I that just happen to be in like an unfortunate, like situation that end up in what is a prison. I mean, we call it a detention center, but having been to a detention center, it is 100% a prison, and people don't have access to a cell phone or easy communication, and they can't really also help themselves. They're very when you said isolated, I think it's important that maybe you guys like talk about what it is, like like the process. Like people end up being incarcerated for a very long time. So maybe, I don't know, Nora or Ambreen, if you want to talk about who are these people and what is really like their daily life, like what access they have, which is very little.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to that. So they, as you mentioned, many people are detained. Most people are detained, I think, who present at the border and who are seeking asylum. It's supposed to be a discretionary, for the most part, it's discretionary, and ICE can decide whether or not to release somebody. But in recent times, we've seen large numbers of people in detention. This is all part of a kind of prison industrial complex where our detention center in Southern California is run by a private corporation. What that means is that from a day-to-day perspective, they have food that is, that's the number one complaint that we hear is the food and the temperature, and then the isolation and lack of communication with their family and their attorneys often. So food, they'll be served beans and rice on a consistent basis, like a very similar meal every meal, hard bread, they'll say. So people with dietary restrictions, that's a whole other consideration. They don't have access, as you mentioned, to phones, like liberal access to phones or cell phones. So attorneys will have to call in, leave a message, and hope that the message for a callback, the request for a callback, comes through. And then they are not given free access to phones. They're supposed to be given free access to speak to a lawyer, but we often see that they're getting these 10-minute calls. So that's another complication of being in detention. When somebody visits detention, so family visitation has been cut off for almost a year, I think or a year and a half, and I think it's just restarting. But for the last year and a half, and I'm not even sure that it has restarted, but for the last year and a half, once you're in there, and you're not seeing anyone that's familiar to you. You are also without cell phone access. I mean, we take for granted that we have cell phones and they have data, and so we can access WhatsApp, and so we can get documents from people in our home country. But that is one of the main challenges of being detained, is when you're trying to argue your case without these resources or without somebody to contact in your home country to get documents. You really are at a disadvantage. You only have what you have in front of you, and that's not very much. It's your story. So an attorney can be life-saving in terms of, and critical in a person's case, in terms of just connecting with the outside world and, sending a WhatsApp message. It might not seem significant to you or I, but that is super significant to somebody's case, and doesn't take a lot of effort, for someone like you or I who has internet access on the outside world. And then, like I mentioned, the temperature, it's freezing in there, and they don't have control. It's so interesting that, when you're not in the detention center, you don't think about these things. But as soon as you step foot and you hear somebody talk about what it's like to experience it, you start realizing, okay, like you walk in, it's cold. Every door has to close behind you before you can get to the next one. When you enter the detention center, you're leaving all your belongings behind. No electronics for attorneys unless they're approved, and you're literally going through like an airport, search while you enter. So I won't speak too much because I know Nora probably has a lot to say as well.
It's great. I think it's great because it's important to realize that when people volunteer, they help somebody who has pretty much no access, who is in a situation where, honestly, like, unless someone comes and help them, they're not going to be able to like go through the motion of a fair trial. And they may not even be able to go home in a timely fashion, because I mean, you'll hear people be like, well, if they don't want to be here, we can just, jump back on a plane and go home. But it's not like that. I mean, maybe you can tell us also, like, even if people want to go home, there is a process. So, and it's not that easy. So maybe you can also tell us, like, it's not, it's not that people choose to be in that situation. They really need to be guided through.
For sure. So when they are coming, they don't have any, not many of them have any idea what to expect. They think the United States is a place that's going to, it's a first world country. It is, it respects human rights, and then they end up surprised that they're going to be in detention. When they first arrive at the detention center, they're placed in a 2-week quarantine, which is basically isolation for 2 weeks. And that's isolation for somebody who has just made it to the, like, literally journeyed for many months, often sometimes a year, has been waiting in Tijuana. We see a lot of people who have the journey through Tijuana, and especially in the last, since the Trump administration and Title 42, which is stopping them from claiming asylum, being turned back. They've been waiting there for over a year, and in very squalid conditions. And then, experiencing racism and crime while they're in Tijuana, coming to the United States, presenting, and then ending up in an immigration detention system, where after they've done everything that they could to seek asylum lawfully, and then they experience even more racism, especially if they aren't Hispanic. We have a lot of West African asylum seekers right now, Brazilian asylum seekers who are in detention. And if you don't speak Spanish, you are at a disadvantage in the system if you don't speak Spanish or English, which many of the people who are detained don't. It comes down from everything to preferential treatment by the guards, to getting food or special jobs. They do work. Many of the people in detention choose to work for $1 a day while they're in detention, so that they can't afford those phone calls. And so that's something else to consider. And yes, when it's finally beat you down and you want to go home, and you think that that the experience that you fled couldn't be as bad as what you're experiencing right now, and you want to go home, it isn't just, as you mentioned, let me go home. You have to get an order for a voluntary departure if that's the case. And there's not many flights that are going out. The flights take a while. There's certain countries where there's no flights happening, and so you're just waiting, even if you're ready to give up.
Right. Yeah, and I think so. Obviously, people can get a bond hearing, but that's also something without a lawyer that would be very difficult to navigate, correct?
For sure, yes. So a bond hearing, one of the ways that we help people in detention is by finding them counsel for custody cases. So that's bond and parole. So they can. Some people aren't eligible for a bond hearing. They won't even get a chance to go before the judge, and so they have to seek release from custody through ICE, through the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office, and that's discretionary. It's arbitrary. From the client's perspective, it's often a losing game, or has been in the past. We're seeing a lot more releases through ICE, which is a welcome turn of events since this new administration. But definitely having a lawyer is critical. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially, IJP was able to place about 75 cases for custody matters in particular. So that's bond and parole. And we helped 24 people get out of detention. And those were volunteer attorneys who had no experience in this area of immigration, who had no background or knowledge of how to work with somebody in jail or detention. And through a limited commitment, they took on these parole cases, which often are just writing a letter, collecting some sponsored documents, presenting them to ICE, and some bond cases as well, which similarly is gathering sponsored documents, because as I mentioned, it's really difficult to connect with the outside world when you're detained. So, a person in detention can try to put their best foot forward. But first of all, they won't know necessarily what the law is and what they need to present. And second of all, they might just physically be or logistically be unable to gather these documents by virtue of their circumstance of being detained. So we see people who have, a great sponsor who doesn't know where to mail things, or, is working a full-time job themselves and supporting a family, and so they aren't able to send the documents as timely as maybe they would, or sometimes mail gets lost. Mailings are another huge issue while you're detained. So that's another. So I think, I think you bring up a good point that that it's not easy just to ask for a bond hearing and then to present these documents. The judge makes the determination, and they're definitely going to give you more time of day if you have a good presentation of your documents by an attorney, and an attorney who is articulating what they're listening for.
Right. So I think we understand that this is, we volunteer to help people that are in dire need, and that it's really like making a huge impact on their lives. And it's really like kind of a situation where if you don't have somebody helping you by your side, you're kind of, you have very little hope, if I could say maybe no hope. But technically, I hope that people that are listening to this webinar really understand that this is critical, and that I hope they're motivated after hearing what you had to say. So I think we're going to move on to the next slide, which is who can volunteer. I actually cannot see the slide, so I hope this is correct. But who can volunteer? So maybe Nora, you could tell us who can volunteer within your organization, knowing that the people that are listening to this webinar are either law students or attorneys.
Let me turn my fan off. It's like 50,000 degrees in here. Okay. So I'm Nora. And I work with Otro Lado. And so a little bit about kind of what we do, just to inform like who we take as volunteers. Essentially, we take everybody. So we have a volunteer database of like thousands of people, and we have attorneys, law students, teachers, social workers. We just put out a call. I needed a random request for cataloging some documentation. So we put out a call, and I have somebody now who ran an entire project at the Library of Congress. So I'm like, I think you are slightly overqualified to organize my Google Drive. But anyway, it's just like, I just love the variety of our volunteers. We have literacy experts, like it's just really nice, but it's not surprising given the work that we do. So we have we're not strictly a legal services organization. We provide immigration legal services. And we also do litigation. We have a really big litigation program. And that's always, we always litigate on behalf of immigrants or refugees. So I'm Nora Phillips. I'm of Phillips and CBP versus CBP. So I'm one of the 3 co-plaintiffs actually in a lawsuit in personal capacity against Border Patrol and their friends after they put passport alerts out on me and me and a colleague and several colleagues. And then, yeah.
For your work, basically based
on human rights activists and journalists. So we were put on this list. It's called Operation Secure Line, and it was leaked to NBC. So I was detained for like 10 hours and interrogated along with my 7-year-old daughter in Guadalajara, and then we were deported, and it was just a great experience. So we litigate. And then we also have very, very holistic representation. So for example, I'm based in LA County Hospital, where I am the in-house attorney for patients and families at the hospital. We do a ton of humanitarian parole. It's a U visa factory. I'm based in pediatrics, the child abuse pediatrics department. And because of that, obviously we work with doctors, nurses. The program is called our Healthcare Legal Partnership. And actually, since we have students here, a really great volunteer opportunity that you can totally do remote. It's through the Healthcare Legal Partnership, and I'm in desperate need of law students. You have to be, the number 1 rule if you want to do this is you have to be nice. Number 2, if you speak Spanish, great. If you don't, that's okay. And then number 3, if you have any experience working with U visas or survivors of crimes, particularly domestic violence, I need you. So the program is I pair a law student with either a med student or a nursing student, and then I give you a U visa and then you file it. So it's a really quick process. I'll get the certifications and then it's like I would say like maybe a 12-hour commitment tops.
Can you tell us what a U visa is?
Yes, I can. Sorry. The U visa is a type of immigration relief for people who are victims of certain crimes. They're called qualifying criminal activity. And there's a long list of them, but the most common that we see are child sex abuse, domestic violence, rape, sexual assault. There's a bunch of others, kidnapping, felonious assault, lots of things. But basically it was a law. I could go so deep in this. I've been doing them for
well, I think this is good. I think people understand, you have a program for victims.
Yeah, but I don't need to go into let's take you back to 2000, Washington, D.C.
Yeah. The idea is basically in your organization, there is a wide variety.
Yeah, we do everything. I think I did a bad job of explaining that because we are also an OTI, Mesa Detention Center, Adelanto Detention Center. We do a lot of detained. And then we also have cases that are in removal proceedings in LA. But I'm the U visa lady and the Binational Family Unity Program lady. So I supervise 2 projects. One of them is the one at the hospital that I'm begging all the students and the pro bonos to volunteer for. And then the other program where I also need volunteers is for our Binational Family Unity Program, which is formerly called Deportee Program. And that was the very, very first program that I started in TJ in 2012 for people who'd been deported from prison.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, but I need you to come help me with the sick kids at the hospital, please, God.
Okay. Well,
I train.
Perfect. Ambreen, do you want to tell us who could participate and how, in which capacity they would participate quickly?
Sure. I'll quickly mention. So we are a legal service organization, and we, as I mentioned, worked out of the Otro Detention Center and in San Diego. We are looking for attorneys, for interpreters, for law students as well, to do legal research, to take on these cases. They can be law students and attorneys or interpreters from all over the country, as long as you have access to a phone, internet that is of use to us. We do, as I mentioned, we do a lot of detained work. We also do some non-detained work. So for clients who are looking for permanency in the U.S., who are looking to file and explore an immigration benefit, we are able to take on those cases as well. So asylum, we do mostly asylum and removal defense, but we also do U visas. We also do SIDGE cases. So we take on some minors as well. That's what we do.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you. So next, I was wondering if your volunteers can choose the type of immigration case they're gonna work on, or if you just place them wherever you have a need.
For us, you definitely, you don't necessarily pick the case. I mean, you kind of end up picking a case by picking the program. So like if you want to volunteer with me, for example, this is so shameless, but I really need help. If you want to volunteer with me, you would specifically pick healthcare legal or binational family unity. But we have so many needs, even beyond legal. Like even if, let's say you're a lawyer and you're fluent in Spanish and you're just kind of like, don't want to do cases but want to help, like you can translate birth certificates all day. Like we'll take you however you would like us to take you. But
I've translated for you guys.
What was that? I know you have. I love it. I'm gonna just put in the chat. Ooh, Zoom like updated its chat thing. What the what? Okay, I'm just oh, that's the Q&A box. I'm just gonna put our link in for volunteering.
Thank you. And we'll at the end we'll also put all the info where people can join your programs.
Okay.
And what about you, Ambreen? Like, can they choose a little bit the type of immigration case?
Yep. So you can choose the type of work that you'd like to do. So whether it's appeals, whether it's briefing, whether it's taking on a bond hearing, so a more limited commitment, or taking on a more extensive commitment, which would be representing somebody in their full removal case. Or if you don't want to go to court at all, we have transactional stuff like I mentioned affirmative filings with USCIS, and this can be done. Even the work in detention can be done remotely. We have access to Skype in the detention center, so attorneys are able to access their clients via Skype, scheduling appointments that way. And yeah, in terms of the type of case and the particular client, so normally I'll send out, a fact summary that is nondescript of the person's identifying information, and attorneys will choose based on, if you want a client who is a woman from Venezuela, we have those. If you want somebody from West Africa, we have those. We have, there's no shortage of need, and so you are able to choose both case type and client type.
Perfect. So I think also for someone who may be, getting their feet in the water, but might not also want, a case that would trigger, either personal trauma or secondary trauma, they might also be able to tell you guys right up front, hey, this is too much for me, and they probably shouldn't be afraid to let you know, also their personal boundaries, so they don't take on too much. I don't know if this would be something that would be a conversation that is welcome, but I would think so.
For sure.
Maybe
for sure.
Yeah, everybody's got, what we can handle, and I don't think they should be scared to tell you right up front, if they have limitations, right?
Absolutely. I think you bring up a good point that it's not only in terms of competency limitations, which we can kind of overcome the barrier by we provide training and mentorship, which I know we'll speak about, but it's also in terms of what you reflected, which is, your personal biases or your personal issues that you've experienced. I have a social work background. I have a master's in social work. So I definitely see the value of knowing yourself and knowing what that can bring to the work as well, because like you alluded to, these aren't just it's not just signing documents in an exchange. It's not just contracts that you're reviewing. These are people's lives, these are people's stories, and it does bring up a lot of it is work that it's hard not to bring it home. Even as our experienced attorneys who are in-house attorneys, we all bring it home because you see in their faces how much they need the support. So yeah, I think it's relevant to know where your limitations are.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for, talking about this. And I think that's also something that sometimes could scare, people away from doing this. It's like not knowing what we're going to be, confronted to. So it can be very difficult, but also like if someone is, not fully ready to take on a type of case, then they can tell you guys, and then you can make it work. So next, can I choose my client? Is that the proper slide that you see? Yes. Good. Okay, perfect. So we've kind of talked about it. It's kind of the same as, my immigration, choosing your immigration case, choosing your client. I think it's in the same like vicinity. Like you said, you can decide to to take on somebody from maybe like your home country, or like someone who just, I don't know, from a country that you have a particular interest in. But you can also maybe choose to take on a child or maybe an adult. So I think that's, I'm assuming this is okay within both of your organizations. No? Nora?
Well, again, it would go by program. Like if you were volunteering with Healthcare Legal, you'd probably get a kid, because but like we don't really rep we don't really rep any kids out. No, that's not true. I'm sorry. My mind is drawing a little bit of a blank, but I think the program where you would mainly rep kids would be mine. But we don't just like give you a kid. So you're stuck with me because those kids are like, almost all of them have been subject to like horrible trauma. No kid that you're working with within the U visa context hasn't. So like those kids are extraordinarily, like there are already a ton of considerations in working with kids. And I think like doing an asylum case or a CITES case for a kid and you haven't, I don't know, you got to be extra special trained when you're working with the littles.
So for instance, you would provide like support along the way. It wouldn't be like, this is your case, now deal with it.
No, I don't think I would do that. No, I wouldn't do that with one of our, unless it was, because there are like pro bonos and then there are like pro bonos. So like every org, hot tips, every org is gonna have, and Ambreen, I'm sure it's the same for you guys, where you have like this kind of, you've got like the amazing sharks. I don't know why I'm using this metaphor because everyone knows I'm scared of sharks, but there you've got like the amazing sharks that are like, 20 feet down, and those are your pro bonos. And then you have like the top level, like I need a case now pro bonos that take tons and tons of pro bono and are usually really good at running businesses, and then, but have such a competence in trauma that I would feel comfortable just being like, okay, do a motion to sub in court, like this case is yours. But I think, but it's like, do you guys have those sharks, Ambreen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, similarly with the kids, like it's usually as part of a family, like they came as part of a family, so they're included on the adult's petition, or we found out that, they're in detention, they're usually over 18. But so, they're minors, they're or under 21. We have like people who are over 18, under 21 who might be eligible for SID and so on, who are in detention. And yeah, in terms of the volunteers, we have some super committed volunteers that are always ready to take on a case and ready for the next challenge. So they'll take on maybe somebody with criminal history because they've developed a baseline competency. Then we have people who are newer and who want to start, with a little taste, and so they'll take on a parole request. So we have
one other scenario in which we would have like kids, but it would be kind of like a family group. We get a lot of requests in all of our offices for work that we just don't do. Like family-based petitions. Like if there's not anything really, really extraordinarily horrible going on in your case, like we don't take it, because we're here to sort of fit within like where the gaps are in the system. So like I'll take your U visa if you have like I've done the last U visa I did was for somebody who was in prison, and it was based on a DCFS certification. So anyway.
Right. Well, so I think we understand that there is a wide spectrum of, cases and clients, and that people can like talk to you about what their interest is. Also, maybe like for the beginning, taking on a case that might not be too difficult to get your feet in the water, and then as we go, like progress to something more challenging and maybe more advanced in terms of skills. Now I was wondering, obviously it's going to depend on the case, but what is the usual time commitment that you request from your volunteers? And is there like a training commitment as well?
I can go and answer that question. So for IJP volunteers, if you're an attorney taking on a case, as I mentioned, we have parole and bond, and so those cases are a shorter time commitment. It would be, over the course of 6 weeks, about 20 hours of time to take on a case like that. Maybe 40 hours for the bond hearing. If you do bond, if you do parole, more like 20. And then if you take on a full removal detained case, normally the case will progress within 6 months. And so if you're there from the beginning, it's a 6-month commitment with about 40 hours, probably about 100 hours a month in terms of a time commitment. And then for appeals, it's going to depend on the appeal and what level it's at. But I think it's safe to say that over the course of an appeal, it's about 100 hours. And then for affirmative cases, so cases filed with USCIS or non-detained cases, those cases, they tend to be a longer time, like in scope. It might be a 2-3 year commitment with like a 5-hour time commitment a month. Maybe sometimes it would be more depending on what stage of the proceeding you're at. For interpreters and translations, it's really when you're available. So if you have a couple hours here and there, you can let us know, especially depending on the language. We're really in need of Portuguese interpreters right now, given the Brazilian population that we're seeing seeking asylum in the United States. But we're also in need of other West African languages. French is a big one as well. So yeah, and then for law students, whatever support you can give in terms of preparing filings, I think is helpful for supporting a pro bono volunteer or supporting our in-house staff. We're a small staff. We have only 7 attorneys representing client population. We're the main, we're the LOP provider. We provide legal orientation program in the detention center, which services about 1,000 ICE detainees. So we hear a lot about the case people are in need, and we try to take as many as we can. And so we rely really heavily on pro bono for volunteer attorneys and pro bono support. And that's just for the detained population. We also serve, the San Diego region where we can. We serve as many asylum seekers that are indigent, that are in need as we can. So that's another place where.
Right. So based on like people's, availability, they may also be able to like fit within one of your programs more easily.
For sure.
And there are some shorter commitments and longer. Sure. Obviously. Yep. What about you, Nora? Oh, sorry.
I mean, I would say for a minute, like, you're talking about for a case, right? You're not talking about like.
No, translation, I think people get that it's, you know, it can be like ongoing
I mean,
or.
yeah, I would say like a minimal to just be effective would be like for the healthcare legal partnership, you take a case. It's not like you could take a removal case, like please, but those are either you're going to be in detention far away in Adelanto or in Otay, or it's going to be a non-detained removal, and it's going to go until like the year 5084. So those are just really tough. But please God, also take non-detained removal. That's another area it's really hard to place. But I would say, you know, that takes a lot longer, like Ambreen was talking about. For healthcare legal, for an extraordinarily easy U visa, because it's such a horribly sad case, like I said, the training is probably going to be 3 to 4 hours, but it'll be really good, and it'll probably be for CLE. And then the work itself, I would say for a case like that, maybe 15 to 20, maybe less.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been doing U visa since 2005. When it was called interim relief, and it's just like it's had its whole journey. But now I think I could probably, the forms are a little bit longer, but I could probably file a U, do a simple U like that, put it together in like 45 minutes. So then multiply that by
certification.
What was that?
You take care of the certification.
Yeah. Unless you want to know how to do a U visa certification, I'll guide you through it. Like it's like my template folder is your template. But yeah, we guide you on, like, if you're a cool person and you want to help us out, like yeah, like what you know, it does depend on the relationship with pro bono. Like sometimes they don't even go through the regular process. They'll just email me and be like, I'm taking yeah, I want to take 3 cases. And you're like, like 3 non-detained removal cases. Like sign up for a batch, we'll love you forever. So
okay, well that's great. I think
actually I should shout out Angeline Chen, who is the attorney who calls us and asks for multiple cases. So there you go.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for taking cases. So I think it's great. You kind of explained to people that there is a time commitment, and obviously like the time commitment may, you know, as we're progressing and taking on a case, maybe the same type of case often, like, you know, obviously we're going to start being more efficient and working a little faster. And one thing that is also, you know, interesting, and that will go towards like, you know, will I get any support and what kind of support I get is like you provide training. This is not about just, you know, lawyers or law students helping people in need. Is lawyers or law students are learning a new skill. They're learning, you know, a new process and a lot of very valuable you know, experience. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your training and what kind of support you provide, because I think that you know, for people who are in, you know, thinking about taking a pro bono case, this will make the whole, you know, difference.
I can speak to the support that we provide. So we, for our detained removal cases, we partnered with the Immigration Justice Campaign, which is a national organization that is under the American Immigration Lawyers Association. It's a project of theirs, where they provide expert mentoring. So they have people who are experts in the field of immigration, and they have a website that has training material, including precedents, webinars, sample filings, practice guides, and they also provide one-on-one mentoring. So you'll have a phone call with your mentor, you'll have an explanation of what resources exist, and then your mentor will be available by phone. They have an office hours format as well. So cases, for example, for bond cases, you'll be able to call in at a certain time and hear what other people's questions are. It's a group kind of learning. So you really do get exposure and get your feet wet in terms of you'll be exposed to different issues that other people are experiencing that might come up in your case. So you're better prepared in that sense. And we do a similar thing for our non-detained cases as well, but we just do that in-house. So we mentor the cases ourselves. It'll be me or another staff attorney who will walk you through what's expected in immigration court, look over your filings, and talk you through what questions to ask of your client as well, and how to prepare for the hearings and so on.
That sounds good. So it's not like people are just like, you don't throw them like into.
No, absolutely not. No, we don't. And if there's opportunities to shadow or witness, or not witness, to observe, that's the word I'm looking for, a case, then we offer those as well, even though all hearings are happening remote. Some of our attorneys go in person, but we can, the ones that are happening over the phone, you can often call in and observe on the phone. So we provide that opportunity.
That's great. What about you, Nora?
So for healthcare legal, specifically, I think that I feel bad about this. I think that there's a general like orientation training, but then for healthcare legal in particular, I think it's like the 3 to 4 hours of trainings that I mentioned. We're going to do one on U visas and U visas, vicarious trauma prevention, and trauma-informed interview techniques. And then we're going to do a whole separate one on U visa declarations. So the idea is basically, if you're a law student, if you're an attorney, especially if you're a med or nursing student too, they have like no offense, but I've been married to a nurse for 20 years. They have he's good, but a lot of them do not have good client interview skills, particularly when talking about trauma. So this is sort of it's designed as kind of like a U visa boot camp, but also sort of like a trauma sensitivity for not only for the client, but also for yourself. So yeah.
Which is very important. It's very important to not, we all take home our cases. Yep. I mean, in the immigration field, I think you're on nonstop, even in your sleep. But I think it's really important to learn these skills without getting
as early as possible in your career.
Yes. And
don't be dead inside like me at 40.
Well, I wouldn't say that about you, but I think it's very important.
You haven't been inside.
We all have mental limitations, and that we can only take on so much, and that unfortunately, when things horrible happen to other people, or when we see that people are in dire need, we do get an urge to help, but that can also be exhausting over many years. So it's very important to learn at the very beginning that there are, boundaries. And so I think if you guys provide these kind of trainings, then that's definitely going to be helpful in the long run for people.
Yeah. So there is a way to dive deeper into trauma for the case, because unfortunately these are cases where the more like asylum, where the more you've suffered, the stronger your case is. But it's also, sometimes it doesn't just follow you home. It takes over your entire life, and it's very bad. And immigration attorneys, it's an extraordinarily stressful job. So I think that, the earlier the better in your career to really learn these things, because it really, I presented at the American Public Health Association. I'm getting my master's in public health. It was a presentation, not on COVID, but on the vicarious trauma, the issues of vicarious trauma as an undiagnosed epidemic in the legal community. And I'm hoping that we keep seeing the new crops of law students. It seems like you're learning more about these things. But it's just of absolutely critical importance, because if you can't do your job, you want to be able to do this for the long run. So
yeah, for sure. I think it's very important that our future volunteer understand that they're going to get, you know, a high out of like helping people, but we don't want them to like suffer, you know, like they're going to do something really great and they're really going to learn. It's going to be good for them. It's going to be good for their clients, but they also learn to like maybe set proper boundaries and set, you know, like expectations from the very beginning, which when you're starting in your career is probably the most valuable you know, set of skills that you should have. So now I'm just going to see if there is, I don't think we have any questions in our chat. I don't see any. Perfect. And so now if anybody wants to sign up to volunteer, I put both contact the IJP and Otro Lado, which are two great organizations. The IJP is directly linked to the ABA, and Otro Lado is a separate entity. They've both done a lot of amazing work. And I think people have gotten to know you guys, so we're probably looking forward to contacting you. So let me check what time it is. We have 10 minutes left, and we're gonna let Ambreen introduce the IJP a little bit more. It is an ABA organization, so we're gonna give them a little bit of time to show all the work that they do. So I will stop sharing my screen. And then Ambreen, you should be able to share your screen now.
Sure. I'm just loading the presentation. I won't speak too much about you know, the intricacies, because I think I've covered a lot of what we do in this presentation. I just really wanted to speak or continue the conversation about client expectations a little bit more. And while I'm loading our brief slide deck, I just wanted to mention that I think one of the ways to really to be able to do this work and mitigate some of the vicarious trauma that you might experience is to set expectations and have good communication with your client. I found that at the get-go, if you're able to set appointments with a client and ask them to reserve, you know, ask them to reserve questions for their appointment so that they're not calling you, you know, consistently, and only that they're calling you outside of that appointment if there's something, you know, pressing that comes up. I find that that really helps. And that's something that we stress for our pro bono attorneys. Just these people are in detention, so that they're only thinking about their case, or the ones that we work with are often in detention, so they have a lot of time where there's, you know, not a lot to do. So they're thinking about their case, and they want to convey everything that they're learning as well as they're doing their research. So having good communication is imperative, because, you know, the last thing that somebody in detention wants is another person who is their lifeline on the outside to not necessarily answer the phone, or to not call them when they said they would. So let me share my screen in the meanwhile. I don't know that I necessarily can.
Yeah, maybe you're not able to. So let me check if I can do it. So yes, let me do it. Are we back on with my screen?
You are, yeah. So I'll just I'll speak about this slide for a second. So I'll just speak briefly. So this is a training that we held in person. It was our last in-person training in January 2020, where we gave the fundamentals of removal defense. We held this in a virtual format this year, where we did an online CLE for people who are interested in learning about removal defense and interested in taking a case. So some of the things that are unique to the IJP is that if you do take a case with IJP, you get you're offered malpractice insurance,
Which
so
is huge. As
yeah.
a private attorney, I have to say, don't ever practice without a malpractice insurance. So this is huge. You should always have a malpractice covering you.
Yeah, so that's definitely a reason why people take cases with us. And as I mentioned, we have a good mentoring system for both detained and non-detained cases, for affirmative cases as well. And then we have ongoing trainings we are a project of the ABA, as Sarah mentioned, and so we have the benefit of having other partners or other projects that we work closely with. So one of them is the Children's Law Academy, CELA. So if you're interested in volunteering with children, they have a lot of opportunities that we can direct you to in that capacity. And we also are able to gather resources from our other projects like ProBar. And I don't have a lot more to say.
ABA, which
That's
is
right.
another ABA immigration project.
That's right. I wanted to just show a picture of what Otay Mesa looks like, the detention center looks like. Let me check. This is a pro bono. Well, that slide that you were just on was a pro bono attorney that that won a case, won asylum case for her client. This is her client just getting out of detention, and they're about to board a plane. You can see how happy she is and how happy he is. I mean, this was probably one of the better moments of his life, is getting permanency in the United States and getting out of detention and finally making that journey. He's from Cameroon. We see a lot of asylum seekers from West Africa, as I mentioned, and Cameroon is very far away. Probably translated through Nigeria and then flew into Ecuador and then made his way up to the United States and through the jungle, through the Amazon and see a lot of clients make that precarious journey and then spend, as I mentioned, a significant amount of time in Mexico, where almost every person that we encounter who spent time in Mexico has been an asylum seeker who's been a victim of crime of some way, whether it's having their stuff stolen, rape, kidnappings. It's not safe, and they have to wait there for many months, sometimes a year or more. And I just wanted to show that. Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, should I? Should I just move to the first slides?
So that's our team. Actually, slide number 5 is what ICE detention.
Okay, awesome. And then the type of volunteer opportunities, we've already talked about it. And the type of cases, we've also talked about it. Who ends up in ICE detention? I think that's something you can stress. It's anybody who's made this journey and is like in a situation that, I mean, maybe you can explain it better, but
sure. I mean, I think I mentioned it. Really, I just want to stress what detention looks like, which is the next slide.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So this is really what it looks like, what these asylum seekers, where they are every day, and the reality. They get to go outside in these like little caged fences. And I want to stress that these are often people without any criminal history, or if they have a criminal history, it's often very limited criminal history. It might be a driving while impaired. It might be, a misdemeanor of some kind. And this is where they are for months and months on end, sometimes often without an attorney, without the same protections that are afforded to them in criminal cases. They aren't assigned an attorney like they are in criminal matters. They have to navigate this extremely complex system on their own. So I just wanted to leave you with that, is that imagine you fled trauma and this is where you ended it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that the people who are watching this webinar are understanding that you at IJP and Otro Lado really need volunteers, and that they will make a huge impact on somebody's life. And I hope that this webinar was, was valuable and provided enough information for people to sign up. Once again, thank you for joining us, and you can find the information with the replay on how to sign up with you guys. So thank you, Ambreen, thank you, Nora, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.